People who got fired on the first day of the job. What happened? Not me, but happened when I was working at McDonald's. New guy came in and when he saw that we were trashing patties if they had been sitting too long, he ate one. Then he started just eating them from the supply. Dude must have inhaled 10-12 patties over a couple hours after repeatedly being told to stop. Eventually, he started making himself a burger with the buns and eating it as well. Got fired first day on the job. I'm still convinced he had no real plans of working and just wanted to see how many free burgers he could eat before getting canned. Got hired. Day 1 after orientation. Got desk set up. Boss walked in and told us this branch was closing. Don't come tomorrow. Got 2 months severance pay. Janitor job at a hospital. Cleaning bathrooms in the patient's rooms. An old lady laying in her bed called me over and said she was born in Germany and she'd learned to speak English but couldn't read it very well. She had a get well card from someone and asked me to read the poem inside. I did. Someone reported me because I wasn't supposed to interact with patients. Got fired before lunch. They called me and told me I was let go for not showing up on my first day. Which was a surprise for me since at no point after the interview had I been told that I'd been hired. I'm a developer. We hired a guy who did an amazing interview. He really seemed to know his stuff and was clearly very intelligent and capable. On his first day he saw some old Codinarity legacy app which wasn't great and he went ducking app it. Began ranting at his desk. Then stood up from his desk and started shouting at his screen. Then started verbally abusing the developer he thought had written the code. He hadn't. The other developer just sat and took the abuse calmly and tried to explain it wasn't his code. And anyway we knew it was old and poorly written but there was no plan for the team to rebuild it. etc. But it was futile and he barely got a word in with the other guy just shouting him down in an endless tirade. He had a full meltdown and was beyond civilized conversation. Project manager had to intervene and have an emergency meeting with the MD and the developer. They mutually agreed he wasn't right for the company. The guy eventually said he had Asperger's and had left many jobs for the same reason. I got into a fist fight with the owner's son. In my defense, he started it. If you're working with the owner's kids, no matter their age, chances are it's gonna suck. Failed the mandatory new hire drug test. I've never done drugs. Used to work at a factory that made food stuff. Guy I was trained with fell into a big vat of wet ingredients that was about to be heated up. Had I not looked behind me, he would have died. The boss went to the hospital to tell him he was fired but they were giving him some extra pay in his check. Just started a new job and a guy on my training group on the first day started offering people LSD. He didn't have a second day. I was 16 and landed my first job in a paint store mixing custom colors for customers. On my first day, I mixed a requested color, following the paint manufacturer's directions exactly. But the result turned out wrong because the formula had changed and my employer had not updated his store's formula specifications. So when the customer complained about the color variance, the boss fired me in front of everyone. Even though I had done the job correctly. It was humiliating. And left a lasting negative impression as to what's involved in joining the workplace. I was a hostess at Applebee's for a day once. I was bussing a table and dropped a cup and whispered it. They never even told me that they fired me. I found out by going into work the next day to see me not on the schedule. I tried to talk to managers and everything, no one would tell me that I was fired. It was like a bad breakup with mind games and eventually I had to force myself into the GM's office and made him explain to me what was going on. Shadiest it ever. I got a job as a waiter at an Australian themed steakhouse. No, not that one. They had me buy construction boots as part of their uniform and a pair of black shorts totaling $50. I had never worked as a waiter before so they had me shadow one of their waitresses. I followed her for drink orders at 2 tables and then she told the boss it wasn't going to work out. No idea what happened. And that was my last $50. In retrospect, that place just screams you don't want to work here, but I'm still mad about it a decade and a half later. How was she the deciding factor of employment? She was the lead waitress. She had influence with the managers for sure. Pretty sure she is also the waitress that had been there far too long. All restaurants have one. Lost balance of the serving tray and spilled hot soup all over the owner. The owner needs to friggin' realize that first day mistakes are first day mistakes. I once dropped 2 armfuls of plates in front of the regional manager because a customer was trying to play a joke on me. You know what the regional manager did? Helped clean up the mess. It didn't help that it was a Greek restaurant and I screamed Opa. I got hired as an independent contractor for some over the phone tech work. Hours were 8 AM to 6 PM. Okay. That's perfect. I go in and get acquainted. Start taking calls. And hours go by. I'm wondering when I get lunch. Newsflash. No lunch. No breaks. Independent contractor or not. Pretty sure here in the US. You gotta give people some breaks and a lunch at some point in a 10-hour shift. Some kind of or about that, I feel sure. So I tell my new boss. Look. I'm starving. I'm going to get something to eat. I'll be back in an hour. He said if you leave, don't bother coming back. So I left. And never went back. Worked at Pitter Pit in college for a day. About halfway through my first shift. The manager asks if I have a car. I said yes. Why? He said I had to go get it and deliver for him till close because the driver he was into called out because she was too hungover. She said this on speaker in front of like half of the people waiting in line and everyone else who was working. If I didn't, he said I was fired. He also told me I had to pay for my own gas and give all tips to him since I was still making 8.20 an hour instead of the 4.50 the drivers made plus tips. He handed me 7 bags and a list of MapQuest directions to them. 3 of the deliveries 10 plus miles away, furthest being 17 miles in the middle of ducking nowhere, Pennsylvania that just screamed deliverance rape scene. Boss called me not even 15 minutes later screaming at me for not making all of the deliveries yet and said that once I came back and gave him his tips, I was fired. With 5 deliveries left to go. I said duck it and went to my friend's place with the rest of the food. Duck that manager. I don't know if this counts, but my dad was interviewed for a job at a Dallas engineering firm in the 60s. They were up in Detroit. Did a bunch of bulk interviews. Processed offers on the spot. He was well qualified. It was a good offer. He gave notice at his current job at GM and packed the family up and drove down. When he showed up on the first day, they met him and said, well, the guys in engineering decided they didn't want to work with any non-white engineers and they were supposed to call you 2 weeks ago and withdraw the offer. Odd me, but I was working at the time. Had worked at a Panera when IWS in college as a shift supervisor. W were looking for a new prep guy and my manager interviewed this guy in Medhinesi. No joke. I told manager I didn't like him and not to HRE him, but he did anyway. His first day he shows up and we give him some training on what to do and he gets to WRK. After about 4 hours my manager SKS if he can take a minute out to go grab a new box of chips. Out F nowhere the guy snaps and says BTCH you don't know me. I'm from the HOD, my manager. Without skipping beats says. Yeah, and I'm from management. Leave. Fired him on the spot. When keeping it real goes wrong. A guy showed up on his first day. Went through orientation. Then out for beers with his boss and a few others. His boss was talking about his 16-year-old girl and the new guy straight face said, is she hot? This was a 24-plus-year-old dude. His first day was his last. Not me, but a guy I knew. I work in the oil field. New guy comes in on night shift. I tell him to go check the giant oil tank to see how full it is. It's a tank as big as a house. He looks down inside it and uses his duckine lighter to get light. Nobody was killed. His job was eliminated for safety reasons. I took a shit in the office toilet and forgot to flush. then ducked up a whole day of surveys. I didn't actually get canned until the 4th morning, but the first day sealed the deal.